digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're joined once again by Paul, and we have with us Jay and Tony. Hello guys.
Hello.
Hey.
So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to, because Paul, the last time you was on this show, technically you represented IBM. Would you care to tell us exactly what you do these days?
No, I am still firmly ensconced in IBM, getting very excited about all the stuff we're doing in the world of blockchain.
Okay.
So, currently doing that. I still have a number of side gigs, as you know, and they are well. I've just basically decided I need 48 hours in a day.
Well, make your day more interesting, why not?
Would help, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
So we have the lovely duo team of Jay and Tony who have a podcast, a little teeny tiny podcast called How to Write a Tune.
Indeed. Jay's the mouth. I'll let him know.
Why don't you tell us more about your show?
By mouth, he means host. How dare you, sir? Yeah, so I'm Jay. I'm the host of How to Write a Tune. Tony's the producer of that show. We basically sit down each week with different musicians and talk about everything from where they started to where they ended up in music. And also, as a sideline, much like Paul, we've got a couple of other fingers in other pies. We're also both directors of a company called Gordon O'Grow Productions as well, which is a creative studio.
Wonderful. And we're joined by Sanj from Halician once again. Sanj, why don't you explain to our listeners exactly what you do?
So my name's Sanj. I'm the experiential producer for Halician. We're a digital design creative agency that's been around about 7 years now. We specialise in new technology. We started off as an AR business, but we've turned into a kind of monolith, multidisciplined digital creative team. We work with some of the biggest brands in the world. So some of the brands we've worked with, so LVMH are one of our biggest clients, the Boucheron Group. We're working with quite a few car companies at the moment. But ultimately, we're really interested in this relationship between digital and the consumer and how the consumer's habits are evolving in this new space.
Well, thank you all for joining us today on this Digital Jam session, and I am Tanya, your friendly host and guide for this session. So today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the future of technology for the music industry. And the reason that this came up, and we decided that we were going to do an episode specifically focused on the music industry, is because the Ozo launched last night. And for those of us who know a little bit about the VR industry, will know that is the 360 camera launched by Nokia to record live action 360. But the thing that was quite interesting for me was there didn't seem to be a huge amount of representation from any of the other industries at the event. Certainly, I didn't see any music folk at the event, which I thought was quite interesting because hypothetically, one would imagine that 360 video or VR video, if that's what you want to call it, for the music industry would be of interest. It would be something that, you could see that logically being a standard format for music videos. So I am curious to crack open this conversation. I'm going to start with you, Paul, just because I know that you're very on the front edge when it comes to music technology. Sure. What's your thoughts on this in terms of either A, why there hasn't been more inclusivity in the conversation with the music industry, or B, what you see the stance for the music industry being when it comes to including this new kind of technology?
I think it's caution. I think the music industry is trying to wrestle with other things and sort out bigger fires in a way, in terms of, at the end of the day, driving record sales. And whilst music tech has definitely had an impact and is making an impact, I think it's an industry that is well known for being in tremendous flux just at the moment. And it's people are trying to work it out day by day as to, okay, what do I do? I've got all these social media channels. I've still got to write decent music. Everything's more fragmented. How do I do direct to fan? How do I address making sure that I can keep track of where my music's being used, and make sure I get paid for that and don't get ripped off, and all those kinds of things. And then on top of that, I've got a tour if I'm elected to be a touring musician, because that potentially is an opportunity to generate more revenue. So I think whatever level you're at in the music industry, I think you're wrestling with those issues all of the time, and there's so much happening in terms of different things that you can do. Digital video streaming, the virtual reality for sure that Musion and Sanj have been doing for forever. Then, it's what do I do first? I could pursue a lot of different things, but what do I do first to make sure I secure enough cash to, pay my rent and pay my bills?
Okay. So from your perspective, Tony, you obviously speak to a lot of actual musicians who are very much at the forefront in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to hear, coming at it from that perspective of, you want to try new things, you want to experiment. A lot of these guys do genuinely want to experiment, but perhaps there's a bit of a lack of understanding or, where to connect to.
Yeah, I'd say there's a large amount of the needing the tech in hand. I think once it's, give it another year or so when these 360 cameras are saturating the market a little more, I think it'll be the public that does it though. I think someone will go to a gig, make a brilliant 360 shot of being at the gig, and then you're at the gig essentially. And that, I just think, I think it's slightly touching on what Paul said. I don't think that the music industry just wants to jump in feet first. I think it's a little more tentative than the other.
But I'm interested and I'm curious about this because you're saying literally, what you're talking about is a real issue. In as much as somebody you could turn up with, a reasonably affordable 360 camera to a gig or, a live sporting event or whatever the thing might be, that hypothetically the owner of the IP or the owner of said event wants to be able to charge people for a ticket price to come into the show. So when you just, plonk a 360 camera in there and record that thing, you're essentially circumventing the need to buy a ticket.
Yeah.
And, that gets even worse when you talk about live streaming 360, which is totally plausible, totally doable. In fact, last night's event, part of the demo was a band playing, 11 kilometers away.
Really?
And they were live streaming that in 360 so that you
That's
could,
cool.
stick a headset on your head and see the band. So when you talk about it in that context, I'd be interested to hear maybe from you, Paul. Do you think that there's going to be a need for restriction on whether or not somebody's allowed to bring a 360 camera into an arena?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, particularly if you look at how mobile phones are sort of taken into the arena. I think you have to. It's a question of quality because I saw a particular an end-to-end gig that was filmed on a variety of mobile phones and then stitched together as one gig, and it was horrible. It really was. If I was the artist, I was, and I saw that, I wouldn't be happy. And it's one of the tier 1 bands, and I guess they haven't got the time to sort of sit down and say, all right, I need to go and chase these people. And get it down, and it's always the double-edged sword. Is that promoting what I'm doing? Am I getting coverage? Does it help? Versus, how does that contravene my intellectual property and my ability to sort of earn money from that? So, I think that's got to be worked out. I think it's interesting with what the likes of Periscope introduced, the ability to stream stuff live. So I think if you were determined you could do it, I think it's up to the music industry to embrace it because to me it's a commercial opportunity. It's an opportunity to create something pretty spectacular. I was at Abbey Road Red when they launched, and one of the companies there was had got a headset on and the ability to sort of go and view a gig from any position on the stage, and I was really taken with that, and I thought, well, that's a great opportunity to go and do something of quality. So I think it'll be inevitable that someone will be able to take these things in. I'm waiting for drone shots of outdoor gigs. Someone flying a drone around the Download Festival or Ramble Man. How do you stop that without shooting? Really taking guns into the arena and shooting the thing out of the air. But I do think I get a sense, and I haven't quite bottomed out why that there is a reluctance to sort of embrace this stuff, when in reality, if you got onto the front foot, you could do something with it. Now, you look at Universal's forays into digital and what they're doing. I mean, everybody's tinkering around the edges, everybody's doing some clever stuff, but is it coordinated? Is it generating results? I'm not too sure. Long rambling answer to a question. So yes, I think 360 degrees cameras will go in, and there'll be all sorts of articles about, some people allow it, some people won't. I wonder what the quality will be, and whether that will influence the adoption. I also agree that someone from the public will create something that's spectacular, and it will gain traction for those very reasons, which I think is a shame. I think the industry could potentially think about doing more.
So from your perspective, Sanj, if you are trying to contain that experience and make sure that actually, we don't have a collection of UGC from, terrible low-end, cameras, but that actually whatever is happening, whatever is being created by that audience is something of a reasonable quality. I mean, what's your stance on this in terms of, do you think that there will need to be some restriction about who can bring a camera into an arena?
Do you know what? It's a really interesting question. One of the quotes that I use in one of our presentations is by Kate Bush. She basically said to an audience at one of her gigs in London a couple of years ago, was that she wanted to engage with an audience without there being any phones and iPads or anything like that, because she felt that they created a barrier. And that was a very strong thing for her to say, because obviously she's a powerful artist, but it's also a very strong challenge to overcome, because this kind of digital democracy that we live in at the moment, where the user is empowered and has this kind of disposable opportunity to film things and take pictures and stuff like that, it kind of feels like another part of the human being, like you've got your legs to walk, you've got your hands to pick things up, and now you've got your digital device to take pictures and film and share, etc. I think the issue for the artist is that, the way they're being represented within the digital universe is different to how they want to be perceived, and there's not much they can control on that. But on the flip side, the user has been conditioned into being this, multimedia brand that can, take a picture of something and share and do this and do that, and the issues with that are that they feel that they're being negated if they're not allowed to do that. So how do we get that balance right? I'm not sure. I mean, one of the things we have to think about is how people are educated in these spaces with this type of equipment. What is the benefit to the user, and what is the benefit of the artist? How we get that balance right?
It's interesting that you're talking about this, because I recall quite distinctly a conversation that Sanj and I had last week while we were at, of all things, the Canadian government were hosting an event. And
Shh, so rock and roll.
But Sanj and I were talking about, I think it was Pixel Mob, Sanj, with the Pix Mob. There you go, Pix Mob. Yep. With the bracelets and the whole, they light up and they interact and they do all sorts of wonderful snazzy things. And they've got Taylor Swift, and that's amazing. And I remember distinctly saying this to you, Sanj, which is, but I don't really understand why. Which is, that it's great that it lights up and it flashes at you, and there's all these lovely colours in the audience. But I'm still unclear as to the real benefit for the audience. And this is one of those things that actually I question the feasibility of some of the technology that is being introduced into these concert and live arena scenarios, where it just feels like sometimes the technology is there for the sake of having technology versus actually doing something meaningful, impactful, or something that really personalizes the experience for somebody who's coming to attend one of these things. And I think perhaps this is inherent in the fact that, a music gig is a live event, and therefore it is experiential. And obviously, Sanj, as an experiential producer, I say with inverted commas and my fingers doing a little curly thing, what your view is on the types of technology that people are seeking to utilise in these environments, and whether or not you think that there is perhaps a little bit more thought that needs to happen when it comes to applying some of these technologies.
No, it's a good question. I mean, the thing about tech within pop culture at the moment is that it's a huge part of what people are looking at, and it's a huge part of cultural relevance at the moment. And when companies or tech ideas break through and connect with people in the right way, there's this kind of cultural relevance that they have. And I remember when I worked on the Tupac hologram at Coachella. Before we did that, I was trying to punt the holographic technology to everyone, and lots of companies loved it, but no one was really doing anything. But then straight after Tupac, everyone was talking about it, and it had cultural relevance, and it was this part of this shift of how people perceive technology within pop culture, and that's great. And there's a lot of that happening in different industries, whether it's medical, whether it's in cars, and now it's happening within music. Now, the reality is, within the live music sector, that nothing is going to change dramatically. Nothing. You buy your ticket, you watch Taylor Swift. She makes you cry because you love her so much. You go home, you go home and you tell everyone about it. That's never going to change. People are always going to buy tickets. They're always going to go to a concert. However, because there's all this new investment in technology, there are companies that are trying to throw some of that stuff into the mix. Now, a lot of the time it falls flat on its face because the tech is too technology focused that it becomes a gimmick, and people are like, well, I don't care about that. I'm buying a ticket to see a concert. But every now and again, something cuts through, and it does something that makes people enjoy the experience a little bit better. And that's the kind of core focus on these types of initiatives. If you're going to bring technology into anything, it needs to have value to the user. And the interesting thing about Pixmob, I know from a tech point of view, especially from people like you and me, Tanya, you look at something like that and you think, well, I don't think I could enjoy that. But I remember when I went to see Coldplay last, back in 2012, and they gave you these wristbands that had lights on them. And it wasn't until the band started playing that these lights started to, fluttering, and there was different colors, and there was like a sort of Mexican wave of colors that was sort of being paraded through the crowd in unison, and it just looks so beautiful. And when you're in that environment and you're with 60,000 people and you're watching a band that you love and everyone's singing along and you're in unison, and then the colors are kind of mimicking the way things are going, that's quite a powerful moment. It's quite a biblical moment. It's quite a godlike moment, and that type of engagement is gold dust. However, if every concert had that experience where, okay, I've got the wristband, what's it going to do at this gig, or what's it going to do at that gig? I don't think that, that's a good experience, because people are kind of, they're quite jaded. They've been, they've seen it all by that point. So
clearly, I'm way too cynical.
Balance right.
But I'm curious, because from what you're saying, Sanj, there is, I think, a degree of us too in this industry, in as much as I'll wait for somebody else to give it a go, and if it works for them, then it's going to work for me, so I'll get on the bandwagon once somebody else has done it. Much as, when you're talking about Tupac, it's kind of a case of, yes, let somebody else take the risk, and once they've done that and it's taken off and exploded all over the place, then I will get on board. So I'm curious from your perspective, Tony and Jay, when you're speaking to these musicians who are, thinking about maybe toying with technology or, faffing about with things, do you feel that there is that kind of us too approach of, you know what, I'll wait for somebody else to do it. If they do it, if they do it and it works, I'll give it a go. Or do you think there is this whole kind of, I want to be the first. I'm gonna break the ground here and I'm gonna try this thing. I mean, what's your sentiment when you're speaking to?
It's interesting because it depends on the musician, because are they technologically savvy enough to allow the music the tech to change their music, or are they going to use it to help enhance the music? As Sandra's saying about the lights at a gig, that sounds amazing because it's another part of the immersive experience of being at a gig. But having a 360 camera at that show, would the same thing pass? And from most of the people we speak to, at the moment, the way the music's changed, much like as Paul was saying at the beginning, because it's in a bit of a flux of how people buy music now and how people listen to music. Something like an album is kind of an old thing. You know, it's now released tracks. I can't remember when, but a few weeks ago we were talking to someone who was saying that their record label said, you don't need an album. Just keep releasing tracks. But no, I want to release a piece like that. But where most of the money seems to come from most musicians is touring. So is the ability to put a 360 camera there and sell that even further, not only just on that one night and having to kind of chase pavements and travel up and down the country or travel around the world, going to be affected by that, or will it enhance the experience? I guess it's hard to say, but it's those musicians that seem to really grab a hold of it, which seem to, well, that's where new sort of industries are created and new mediums almost come sprawling out of. I mean, last we saw was when in the 90s, when you saw this huge explosion of dance music, and beforehand it wasn't really something, you know, I say dance music of like EDM, of like electronic dance music, and it was something which came out of nowhere because people with computers were all of a sudden like, look how much I can do. And now we live in an age when everyone, essentially, you can record most of an album, on your phone? But it all comes down to just what Paul was saying, is the quality.
Yeah.
What is the quality you want in that? So I think that's why a lot of people end up waiting until it's been done, because if he did it once, well, hang on, I can enhance it in this way, and then it's a great product. But is that first draft the way I want to convey my music?
Okay, so I'm going to spin this one at you then, Tony, which is that one of the things that I do notice is that sometimes you do get the occasional really savvy musician, the really savvy artiste who understands how to not necessarily utilise new technology, but to just leverage the existing technology. So I'm going to give an example here of the lovely Jessie J. And actually, on occasion, she would just, you know, the crowd are all doing their thing, and you know, the whole Kate Bush thing of people with their mobile phones not really being present in the moment, but using their mobile phone to record the moment, because you know what, nobody's memory is any good anymore. But one of the things that she tends to do is she will take somebody's mobile phone and she will kind of, you know, spin around and show her point of view, and then give that camera back to, or give that mobile phone back to the person in the audience. And it's become this kind of this thing now that the followers like to post those things on YouTube, and everybody can kind of feel like a little bit like they were in Jessie J's shoes for, like, you know, sure, all of 60 seconds. But the idea that sometimes all it takes is for somebody to be savvy about the technology and be willing to just kind of use it in the way that it is intended. Not necessarily do something new and groundbreaking, but just, you know, the way it was intended. But do you think that there is perhaps, it's not necessarily about the technology so much as the personality and the individual?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a bit of a gap there at the moment. I think as younger professional musicians come up who already understand the tech because they were born into that world, that will become much less of a problem. But I think there's a real tribal old schoolness to a lot of musicians, where, going back to the wristbands, that is a tribal thing, like us versus them. We're the yellow band because we support this artist, and we're the blue. I mean, it all comes from K-pop, where it's very much that way, and like there is a real rivalry there. And I think there is a separation there where the industry of music and the IP, the musicians, I think there's a bigger distance there than there is between, say, a software developer and the industry employing them, where everybody gets it there. Music is just, there's just a much bigger gap to cross, I think. But as I say, I think as the younger guys coming up, that'll be much less of a problem. But doing it with the old John Otway and the old rock stars, I mean, I don't know, how do you convince them that that's the best plan when it's not, I never did that before. You know, it's, I think, yeah, there's a big gap to bridge, but it is, much like we were saying before, just a few examples being successful, I think, is all it takes for the industry to jump on board. Then the artist really doesn't have, the artist doesn't need to have a clue or care, because it's, at the end of the day, it's going to be the businesses that are funding it.
Although I am curious, and Paul, I'm going to throw this one at you, which is to say that hypothetically, it does kind of matter a little bit whether or not the musician is on board with all of this, because fundamentally it has to be driven by their desire to want to be involved in this stuff. Because, you know, if they're not into it, they're not going to do it. You know, it doesn't matter how much you give them the technology to, like, you know, wave around whilst they're on the stage. If they don't like it, they're just not going to do it. I'm curious, Paul, from your perspective, how much of this you think is driven by the business, and how much you think is going to be driven by the individual? Because I tend to worry that the music industry is not dissimilar to the film industry, in the respect of, actually, there are just certain technologies which are very well entrenched, and that people will want to continue to utilize, irrespective of the fact that there are new, smarter technologies coming down the pipeline. They just want to stick with what they know. And I think that perhaps there is a certain degree of that in the music industry as well. From a corporate perspective, what's your take on this?
I think it's all about thinking about what it is you as an artist are doing. You're inviting someone to a party, and if you're throwing a party, what makes that party special in sharing what you're doing with the guests that you've invited? All right, they've paid a ticket to go, but how can you make it different? How can you, Peter Gabriel doesn't need a 360-degree camera, but when you go to a concert, it's a special experience. So what is it about the process of the production process that actually the artist is involved in that then makes that come to life into something that's really, it's not really technology driven. It's going back to the basics of what the music industry was all about. And maybe that's showing my age a bit, but it is about what's the no quality song, no music industry, and where you see people investing properly in that artistry and looking at how to deploy technology. I'm not anti-technology. I think it's great.
That would be awkward if you work for IBM and you're anti-technology.
It would. But what I'm against is going, oh look, new shiny toy. Let's go and see what we can do with this without any real thought about how to incorporating it into the production. I also think there's some technology out there. There's all sorts of technology. There's technology which is sort of front of house. How do you make the experience? The wristbands, the lights, all that kind of thing. And then there's sort of backstage technology, which actually could make the experience also quite special in the way that you join things up. And I think part of the problem with the live industry is it's so fragmented. You've got the venue, you've got the promoter, you've got the PR, you've got the booker, you've got the artist, you've got a whole entourage that sits around this thing, and consequently, creating something that's going to work in all settings becomes quite difficult, and getting everybody to work together becomes difficult.
Do you think that's something that needs to happen, Paul, in terms of unifying the industry a bit more?
I don't think it's about unifying the industry. I think it's about because there's enough homogeneity in music as it is. We want more diversity in terms of the artistry and what's out there. And the reality is below tier 1, tier 2. There's plenty of that in spades. The issue is how do those artists get funded to get the kind of visibility to then, and also the kind of funding that is then going to support them in bringing a new show. But if you look at so one of the things I've been reading is about how the circus for years was always had this standard format, 2 or 3 rings and a ringmaster and various things that happen in the ring, and the audience and you pay your ticket, you roll up, you'd see various stuff, and then you go away. And then along comes Cirque du Soleil. And Cirque du Soleil uses technology in spades. And you look at that and you go, actually, that's extremely well thought through in terms of how do I create something that hasn't been seen before. So the very first time it came out, it was a spectacular splash because it was so radically different. But even now, as they bring out new shows, they're looking at different ways of bringing stuff. And that's where technology and creativity and artistry sort of join together, I think, and get used in that way. And certainly for me, that's what's going to turn me on as ticket prices continue to escalate.
Okay.
You look at Jean-Michel. So Jean-Michel Jarre's just announced his tour in the UK, and his ticket prices range from 40 quid to, I think at the O2 was the VIP top end was 376. But all you were getting for the VIP end was guaranteed front row seats, some specialist merch, a canapé, a glass of champagne, and a photo with Jean-Michel Jarre. Well, that's a lot of money for that, and I can see how that would be the case. But someone as gifted as he is from an artistry perspective in doing new things, you kind of hope he ups the ante in terms of, okay, so what are you going to create in terms of light, sound, and music that's going to be a bit different that people haven't seen, and I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will be spectacular.
Okay. So I'm curious because I know from your perspective, Sanj, you do work in other industries. So I'm going to ask this one at you, but I'm curious as to what you think it is that the music industry can learn from other industries. Because as I sit here listening to Paul speak, I'm actually sitting there thinking, but hold on a minute. There are things that you could be doing. And I'm just like, no, that might work in other industries, but maybe not the music industry. So I'm curious, Sanj, from your perspective, what you think it is that the music industry could learn from other industries, whether that is other creative industries or other technical industries.
To be honest, I'm kind of I sit on the same shelf as Paul, to be honest. I mean, the music industry, like any form of artistic, expression, or any industry that uses artistic expression, whether it's film or TV or whatever, the most important, thing within that is the art form. So if the music's not good, it doesn't matter what you throw at it, what technology, what PR campaign, or what type of strategy you throw at it. It's just not going to go anywhere. And the reality is the listener or the viewer or the user is a very complex and very, very sophisticated person, and they should be respected. And before I worked on Tupac, we did a few digital resurrection pieces, and people were really into them and they loved them, and it was great. But then after Tupac, we started doing more digital resurrection pieces, and they didn't really have the magical impact that Tupac did, because Tupac, it was all about the legend of Tupac, the legend of the genre, and the narrative was so strong and so compelling that even if they did the show without the hologram and they just got someone that looked like him and performed, it would still be a fantastic thing. And I actually, that sounds a bit weird, but I think that's the issue here, is that it's not about the technology, it's not about how the concept is applied. It's about the creativity and what the narrative is and who the artist is and what they've done and why they are compelling to someone that's going to purchase that ticket. I mean, the thing about the reason why the music industry had a recession before the recession was because the industry didn't embrace the kind of way the user's habits were evolving. And I'll never forget when I was studying music at Westminster, and this was like 2001. I remember being in an office in Sony, and there was a huge meeting, and one of the heads, they were like a VP or something at Sony at the time. They just walked into this meeting. They threw an MP3 player onto the table, and they were like, "Do you know you can download 4 hours of music in the space of half an hour onto this device?" And that was the mentality of the people at the top of the industry at the time. I mean, it's changed completely now. And the reality was, when people want something, whether it's music, whether it's film, whatever it is, they will get it. And for a long time, the people had to buy a CD from a shop, and that CD was manufactured and presented to them in a way that made it desirable. And what the internet has done is democratized that habit, and the world has evolved into a way where if they want something, want to listen to something, they'll listen to it. They'll go on YouTube. If it's not on YouTube, they'll go somewhere else. If it's not on there, they'll go, until they find it. And that was the cultural shift that occurred then. And now we live in a world where, it's so dynamic. The way the user evolves, their habits evolve, changes so quickly, every second, that it's only companies like Google and, Facebook and people that are monitoring the world in real time that can, understand what's happening and how people are changing, how people are thinking, and then react on that. And that's where I think all industries need to understand.
Okay. So I'm curious. nothing to apologise for, Sanj. I'm curious to understand, because I think one of the things that's fundamental to the music industry, and you've kind of mentioned this yourself, Sanj, to a certain extent, as has Paul, is the fact that when it comes down to the music, it's a very subjective thing. It's a very personal experience. And technology is great at facilitating mass communication and mass experience. But if you had to look at the next 5 to 10 years and think about what would be that significant cultural shift or technological shift that is going to help to actually just make the experience unique to the individual and personalize the experience, what do you think that technology would be? And I'm going to throw that at you first, Paul.
I think that's going to vary by age group, because different people have different experiences. So if you're like me and you grew up with vinyl, then the thing I'm interested in is find me new music that sounds like the music I love, and I keep going back to. Find me all that, and make recommendations, and then feed my passion at different price points. So give me some free stuff to get me hooked, and then lead me in gently, but then pay attention to what how I behave. So I'm fairly tight and won't pay more than 50 quid. 50 quid a concert ticket now, unless it's really, really special. But I've been to that. So I think you've got to take into account the age group and what each different age group is going to want. So I actually ordered my first piece of vinyl, brand new vinyl, pre-ordered today for the first time in, God, it must be 20 years since I've done that. Wow. But I'm really, really excited about that, and I can't wait to get it because it's a gatefold album. It's got a CD. There's been some real thought and craftsmanship thought into that experience of what that looks like. So to me, as average old fart, then that's going to appeal. But if I'm a youngster and I'm into perhaps more mass market, then I'm going to have to think about that. So I would think a lot of it's about good old-fashioned marketing. Number one, from a business perspective. Number two, I think it's good artist development and smart artist development, thinking about how to stand out and do that. So I think, to avoid a rambling answer, I think music discovery is key. I think blockchain is going to be key. There needs to be something that overcomes the issue of fairness, the issue of transparency, in a way that protects people's competitive advantage, and also makes the current system more legally robust than perhaps it is at the moment, because the download is neither a license nor a product. Not a download. A stream is neither a license nor a product. So, where does that leave people? I think then there are some. So I would say for me, discovery, blockchain, and then the live experience. It's then about thinking, what can we do with that that's different? So I always hoped, Sanj, that Musion would do, the first artist to appear on 5 continents simultaneously, but unfortunately it didn't get there. But it's kind of like that's never been done before, and that's interesting. But it's thinking about that experience and remembering what's special. I mean, at the end of the day, the laws of supply and demand apply to an artist. So if you get too much of an artist, if you read the sort of the various streams and feeds, you think the music industry consisted of Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift, and it clearly doesn't. Yeah, quite, and that's okay. I'm not knocking them. They are where they are, serving their particular space, and because of them, a lot of people get employed in the music industry doing a job that they typically love, either on stage or in that ecosystem. So I think that's fantastic. But what I want to see is more joined up thinking in terms of how do you help, how do you actually serve what people want from a live experience. So right through to how do you get to the gig, how do you get the right seat, what can you get afterwards. I mean, it always amazes me that you get tickets to gig 6 months in advance, and you still hear nothing from the PR, from the promoter, from the venue, from the A&R guy. from the manager, from the artist themselves. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I've just stuck 50 quid up. And by the way, this is the 5th tour out of 5 that I'm actually seeing them. Doesn't that tell you something? Isn't there something that you could do to actually bond me to that? And I'm always amazed that things, that savvy bands aren't doing more of this, although it's starting to come to, you see pockets of this happening. So again, long rambling answer, but I think those are the areas I'd want to focus in on.
Okay. And what about you, Tony?
There is, what I'll do actually is, I think to a degree we're all on the same side of this debate, so I'm going to put my tier 1 management hat on and pretend I'm the manager of the Gorillaz or something. Say, if we look back over since Napster, and that was definitely an oversight, missing that whole download part. YouTube's growth, though, I think the music industry missed out on the first few years of YouTube, but then eventually waiting for the licensing systems and Vimeo to come along and fix that problem for them meant that they then jumped straight into it, and now they have all their licenses paid. There's obviously all of the pirated stuff still there, but it from the point of view of someone certainly at the top end where they're already successful, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is probably the mentality of quite a lot of them, especially given you don't want to spend the money if you don't have to. I really do think that's the mentality. I've switched back to anti-music. Sorry. No. Why would we spend that money? Because we're doing just fine.
I think what's interesting as well is the way people consume music now. Much like Paul, I've gone through a real big resurgence now of vinyl, and it's a tactile thing, and I can sit and I can read the lyrics. You remember when you were a kid and you used to read the lyrics to something? Now I hear so many different songs. I never look at their artwork. Maybe in a tiny little left-hand side of my phone as I stream it on Apple Music or something. But I will go through new music and I'll stream on Apple Music or something or Spotify and listen to it there. But there's almost become a kind of unwritten understanding between the audience and the artist that I, as the audience, want to hear more of this. So I'll buy something from you. Like, I know this costs money, and, if I want you to keep doing it, more so obviously with smaller artists, but, you'll see smaller artists bring CDs. And I know people who will just buy the CDs at gigs because I know that gets them. I'm one of those people.
Yeah. I'll only buy a CD directly from the artist.
Yes.
I refuse to buy it from anywhere else.
Exactly. And
because then they get the money.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
No, I think that's important. I think you're tapping into something essential there.
And that little understanding between me as a consumer, I love to not pay for things.
Does that make you a consumer if you don't pay for it?
Well,
Just curious.
that's it. But so I have to be talked into it because I love stuff for free. I have to be talked into it. So give me the free YouTube video. Give me here, but also give me something cool I can buy in a medium that's interesting, and then give me a live show. Let me come and see your live show. Now, I right back at the beginning, obviously, we're talking about 360 camera and how that can be used. I would love to be on stage with, who did Paul mention that? Peter Gabriel. Yeah. I'd love to be stood on stage for the whole gig.
You're the guitarist.
Oh my God, I'm the guitarist. Come on. And stand behind the whole thing. I forget the band's name, but they did 2 or 3 part videos where there was a GoPro strapped to someone, and it was a real, almost like a computer game.
Yeah.
So that guy the director of that has just got a movie, and it's a full length movie, which is all going to be shot with the GoPro kind of first person almost. I'm into that, but I got a little taste of it through music, so it is an easy medium. So I think music's almost, because it's such a great leveler, will end up being something that I, as a consumer, I want to see more stuff. So I'll be interested in if a band brings out something cool on this medium. Hell, I'm in. Give me something that I can get involved in, and I will give you a few doubloons out of my collection of money and get some of that. Because literally, I've gone through now and bought all of the old albums, which I love from being a kid, on vinyl now.
Yeah.
And I've had the CD 6 times, and I've downloaded it on 10 different things. Only now am I going back to vinyl. Do I feel like I've got it?
Yeah, it's interesting though that there is this thing of we're streaming everything, and everything's in the cloud, and we don't physically own things anymore. And it was something that I do recall a session that we had a little while back where somebody just said, emphatically, make sure you own stuff, because unless you physically own this thing, you don't really own it. And I do think that is quite an interesting point, that people, maybe there is a shift back to, I want to physically get my hands on the music.
And the Kickstarter mentality. I can help you do something. You know, there's podcasts out there who will say it's a free podcast, it's a free medium. However, here is a space to give me some money. Who's the history guy?
Dan Carlin.
Dan Carlin. So Dan Carlin has an option where you can give him some money every month if you want to, as little or as much as you want. And he will use that to continue to knock out the podcasts. They're fantastic history podcasts. I want to hear more. He can have a few pennies. You know, and if I want content, I understand it needs to be built and paid by someone, so I'm willing to put some money into that now.
Okay. Sanj, what's your response to this question?
The thing about music is it's such a emotional connection between the user that people will always be into it. People need music, you know, whether you're walking down the street, whether you're lying down, whether you're, you know, getting married, whatever. People want a soundtrack to their lives, and that will never change. And when people like something, they'll pay money to see something. They'll do whatever it takes to listen to something. You know, people wear T-shirts with bands that they love or artists that they love printed on them. You know, that's the power of music, and that's awesome, and that will never change. With the way it's going, I don't know. I mean, the sad thing is, ticket prices are going to go up. That's just something that's going to happen. You know, I remember going to see, to go and see a big band at somewhere like Wembley would cost you £15. You know, to go and see Radiohead at the Roundhouse is about £60. You know, and it's things have changed, and it's because the industry's changed, and it always will change. What I love about the music industry is that it's very, you know, it's very two turntables and a microphone. You know, the reason punk existed is because people just got together, started writing some songs, and started performing, and that's beautiful, and that's where music should be. You know, the industry around it, I think there just needs to be more investment in the development of new artists. It's very hard for a new artist to break. You know, some of them are really savvy. They're really good on, you know, social media, etc. And then they start to sort of create a buzz, and, you know, people look at those numbers and go, actually, you know what, I'm going to invest in them and sign them or give them a publishing deal or whatever. And that's great. But there needs to be more A&R people that are actively looking for new artists, you know, from the ground up, and developing them before they take them to market, so that, you know, there's opportunities for them. You know, U2, if they were to, you know, come around in this era, they would never have got signed. You know, it's because there was investment and development, you know, on that artist. The other thing as well is, you know, we're talking about tactile experiences. Yes, you know, people love tactile experiences. I love, you know, if print was to come out tomorrow, it would destroy digital, because, you know, people love the smell of things and the feel of things. However, the great thing about, you know, things like 360 and this new digital world that we live in is there's new ways for artists to express themselves, you know, whether it's through Instagram, whether it's through 360 video, whether it's through film or whatever. There's a digital democracy that was still in its infancy, even though it's been around for about, you know, almost 17 years, and that's really exciting. You know, there's this constant reminder. Oh, you know, people are starting to buy vinyl. People have always been buying vinyl, and people always will buy vinyl. You know, whether you know it's lots of vinyl or less vinyl, it's just another form of listening to you know, that band that you love, and that's a great thing. You know, vinyl should be around forever.
Okay, well, as per usual, we like to ask our lovely listeners. We like to give our lovely listeners a way to be able to follow you and find out more about what you're up to. So if you would be willing to share with us your social media handle of choice, Paul.
Reach out to me on Twitter at Paul Crick.
Wonderful.
Simple.
Thank you. And Tony?
Yeah, go on then. We are Twitter's the easiest. That's for the podcast, How to Write a Tune, H2What, and GL Pro UK, both on Twitter.
Wonderful. So I'm not going to bother asking you, Jay, since you're a duo, you're a tandem. Sanj, what would be the social media handle of choice?
So you can get me on at Sanj Surati, which is SanjSurati, or get me on the Holition handle, which is at Holition, HOLITION.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this Digital Jam session. If you enjoy this content and you'd like to hear some more, then don't forget to subscribe and review. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter. We are Digital Jam Ltd. But thank you once again for joining us on this Digital Jam session.
digitaljamsessions.com